Cyphers. We used to be called sorcerers, a rare breed of being that could wield mind-controlling powers. In reality, we could control electrical impulses, but we didn't come into our own until the first real computers were invented. Then we became tech gods. While we are still at an advantage to most, even those days are past now. Now, we're a curiosity in a world where tech bridges all the gaps and has mostly replaced magic. My name's Ulf Whitlock. I'm one of a small number of people who has inherited the powers of the Cyphers. I'm also a hunter. I track down criminals for the government and that juicy paycheck. I even have my own badge. I take on all types: orcs, elves, goblins. Shoot first, ask questions maybe. That's how Dad did it, it's how his dad did it, and I'm one for tradition. Welcome to the world of cybernetics and the punk. To my world of magic, blood, sweat and steel. Welcome to the Cyphers Edge. Four women, 3 guns. 2 of us. Oh yeah, I can count 'em good. I liked those odds. Step back or we blow you away, I said, keeping my eye on the one in front of me, but directing my words to the leader. The woman beside the throne was the leader. Some things were just obvious like that. You didn't have to ask wolves which one was the alpha. They were just built different. You think you're fast enough? She asked languidly. I could feel Reva's emotions starting to rise. Why don't you make a move and find out? The leader chuckled. Is that your handiwork, Miss Crispy there? I asked, still looking at the one closest to me. She had her hands by her side, palms out, fingers splayed, ready to conjure something. The leader, on the other hand, sounded relaxed, casual. I could hear her pacing. Yes, my mother, you know. Oh good, we'd found psychotic witches. This day just kept getting better and better. Nothing to do with us, we're just passing through. Needed somewhere safe to bed down for the night. There are no tourists in the garden. You clearly haven't heard about the roaring trade in hunting excursions then. She scoffed. Oh, I know about the vampire. It pleased my mother to suffer his incursions into our territory. One of her many mistakes I am yet to rectify. She practically spat the word mother. Look, I don't really care about what your unresolved maternal trauma is. I'm just here looking for a friend. The steps drew closer. She stepped around me into my field of vision. She smiled sweetly. Well, maybe we can help you. Who is your friend? I knew when someone was patronizing me. I tossed the name out there anyway, looking for a reaction. Sam Kellen. She didn't flinch, no reaction at all. She resumed her pacing around us. And this friend of yours came into the garden of their own free will? I grimaced. Sort of. She sounds like a fool. Vicious she may be, but she was a terrible liar. She? I never said they were a girl. The witch stopped. Her eyes locked on mine. You didn't? I thought a clear countdown to Reva. On my mark. No. 3. She gave me a small smile, just a slight twisting of the lips. 2. That is unfortunate. 1. Reva and I pulled our triggers simultaneously. The woman I had my sights on had taken her eyes off me for just a moment to look at her mistress when the bullet caught her in the head. I swung my gun around to the leader, but she had already disappeared into a cloud of smoke. It rushed to the other side of the room and began to coalesce. I fired 2 more rounds. She broke apart and moved again. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the second dead witch. Then out of nowhere, Reva grabbed me from behind and dropped me to the ground as a green fireball flew above us, just frying the top of Reva's hair. I was on the ground just long enough for the leader to reform into a solid state and conjure up her own fire. I looked up, bringing my gun to bear at the same time. Shit! I wrapped my arms around Reva and rolled to the side at the same time the column of fire impacted the ground where we had just been. We rolled until we hit the wall. I looked up, bringing my gun around to sight on whoever was closer. Drop it! Both of them had hands raised, pointed at us, with green fire already burning before them. I gritted my teeth and dropped the gun. The bald witch strode forward, kicking my gun to one side. "It's your lucky day. You get to see your friend after all." They didn't make us walk. They didn't even make us get up. Between the two of them, they cast a binding spell and then a levitation spell, lifting us into the air, still tangled together the same way we had been as we rolled across the floor. What a ridiculous sight we must have looked as they floated us through the jungle. Our weapons had been bundled up and slung across one of their shoulders. Pressed against Reva as I was, I could hear her thoughts just as clear as she could hear mine. "So, what's your plan?" she asked me telepathically. I rolled my eyes, responding mentally. "My plan right now is to survive as long as we can." "Oh, good plan. I can tell I'm in the presence of a tactical genius." I shot her a look. "I don't hear you offering any ideas." This time, she rolled her eyes, exaggerating my own expression. The bald witch looked down at us and frowned. We both froze. "Can she hear us?" Reva hazarded. The witch looked back up, back to the path ahead. I tried not to make any suggestive movements or expressions. "No, I don't think so. Just don't make too many expressions." We travelled in telepathic silence for a while. I could hear all of her thoughts, of course, but we weren't directing anything at each other. It was just a mix of emotions and all sorts of internal monologue. Reva thought at me again as the witches struggled up the path of wet mud, attention fully on the path. "Well, you've achieved one thing we wanted." "Really? What's that?" I asked, taking my eyes off our captors just to see Reva give me a small grin. "Wherever they're taking us, it'll probably be safe from the local wildlife." I suppressed a laugh. At least there was a bright side. The rest of the trek wasn't long, but it was clearly uncomfortable for the two witches. They probably weren't used to actually having to walk anywhere in this hellhole. I opened my mouth to say something scathing, but Reva rebuked me with a thought before I could enrage our captors. I did have a habit of running my mouth when I shouldn't, like, for example, when I was at the mercy of psychotic witches. I looked around us at the jungle. We were going uphill and I could hear the sound of waves crashing on the basalt cliffs below. I knew where we were going, I just didn't know where we were going. Obviously, this Warcliffe place was some sort of base for this renegade coven. The flash of light Reva had seen, I now suspected it to be some kind of early warning magic. Maybe we had come too close to their camp and set it off. There had probably been similar magic left simmering away at the old coven too. They had known we were snooping around. As we crested the top of the hill, the ground became increasingly steep. A huge structure loomed out of the trees. A 2-story sprawling brick structure. It was an assembly of orange and red brick buildings. It looked like more of the structure had been added at later dates and made to match. There was a wide frontage with a sort of courtyard before it. The roof destroyed and patched back together with various items, but the bulk of the building was amazingly intact. The ground in front of the entrance had been cleared down to dirt and bare stone. The magic had heaved the blue-grey basalt up from the deep below and deformed the terrain. It had been scorched clean and then marked with various items and magic symbols. The upheaval of the basalt rock below had somehow not disturbed the building in any obvious way, or maybe they had put it back together in some arcane manner. Up on the roof and the sheltered balconies, other black-clad witches stood, their faces covered by black wrappings, their long cloaks trailing in the wind. Bit melodramatic, aren't we? I couldn't help myself saying it, not even Reva had time to stop my mouth. The bald woman glared at me, her eyes venomous. "They are the acolytes. They must earn their place by standing vigil." "And the matching outfits? Black is slimming, I'll give you that, and it does go with everything." "Mock all you like, you'll choke on those words before long." I could hear Reva telling me repeatedly to shut up in my mind. "I'm just saying, you should accessorize more." She turned, her motion fast as a snake, and slapped me across the face, palm open, her pointed nails leaving cuts across my face. I cried out in pain, trying to pull away and twist free, but it was pointless. I saw her smile sweetly at me as blood dripped across one of my eyes. I'm going to look forward to practicing on you. Just happy to be of assistance, I said through the pain and gritted teeth. Two more of the coven approached us from the front entrance. Their heads and faces were not covered, but their bald skulls were covered in tattoos, similar to that of the leader. Both were clearly older, human. I looked at the figures on the roof. They must all have been humans or elves. No green skin, no short stature. I looked back at the pair as they bowed and addressed the younger woman. Lady Mara, they chorused in unison. She recognized the greeting with a nod, then held out her empty hand. Take the binding spell and lock them up with the others. We have enough now. Tomorrow we will try again. What about the waders? One of them asked softly. The one called Mara shook her head. The waders are too twisted by magic already. It will take more effort and experience. I am still displeased. The loss of our only successful creation. It is very disappointing. We found no trace of the command prism in the trinkets from the other coven. Mara swore under her breath. They may have destroyed it. I knew we should have kept some alive. She made a dismissive gesture. Be about your tasks. I will take a closer look at the items. The two other witches held out their hands in front of them. I didn't shift to my other side, but I could feel the glitch in the magic as they handed off the spell and took control. They won't be alone. We have found some intruders while you were gone. Mara raised an eyebrow. Really? More new friends? They nodded. The vampires, tourists. And the pest himself? One of them grinned maliciously. We disposed of him. She turned and began to walk away. Good riddance. We were levitated into the building, not by the front entrance but by a side door. Much of the core structure of the building remained, but there had clearly been changes. The hallway ahead of us had been dug up and a crudely cut set of stairs descended into the stone below. Rooms barred by black metal were carved into either side of the hallway, the path lit by eerie green fire that simply hung in the air every few meters. Finally, we drew level with the cell, the door already open. They floated us inside, then closed the barred door without saying anything, then simply let the spell go. We fell to the ground, the cold stone floor rushing up to meet my face. You're not getting a tip, I shouted at them as they strode away. Reva slapped me on the back of the head as she got to her feet and stretched. Do you want to give them more of a reason to kill us? I pushed myself to my knees and looked around the gloom. I don't think they need more reasons. He's not wrong. I peered into the cell opposite, where the voice had come from. I knew that voice. Jethro? The orc loomed out of the dark and leant on the bars. One of his cybernetic arms was totally destroyed, and his face looked like someone had slashed it the same as mine, but his cuts went even deeper. Hey, he gave me a small wave with his good arm. So they got you too, mongrel. Mavic? How the hell did you guys end up in here? He got to his feet and walked to the front of the cell. He looked like he shouldn't be able to stand. His face was bloody and bruised, his body covered in burns and cuts. Jethro sighed. Apparently the territorial lines have been redrawn. What happened to the rest of your party? Where's Caliban? Reva had taken up the position next to me, her hands gripping the bars like she was trying to rip them out of the floor. The orc turned his back to the wall, leant against it and slid down until he was sitting on the floor. Mavic just shook his head. What happened? I reiterated. Jethro put his head in his hands and groaned. Fuck knows. 1 minute we're tracking this creature through the jungle, finally catching up to it. Next second these black smoke bitches come out of the shadows by the dozen. He paused, taking a few deep breaths. Mavic took over. It was a fucking slaughter. And your guide? He was the first to go. They tore him apart like a rag doll before he even knew they were there. I think there was a bit of a grudge there, to tell you the truth, Jethro put in. We stood in silence for a long moment. But why did they keep you alive? Did they say anything about what they're going to do to us? Mavic shook his head. We were brought here unconscious. You're the first people we've seen. He paused. Well, except for her. He pointed to the cell next to ours. I looked at the wall, then switched to my other sight and looked through it. Magic was welling up from the ground in waves of energy. It was so potent it was showing up clearly in my vision. There was no electronics around us, nothing but our cybernetics, and those of one lone figure seated at the back of the cell next to ours. Jethro looked up and squinted into the dark. "What?" "I can see you there, kiddo," Mavic said. The figure was huddled in a corner as far as I could tell. I took a shot in the dark. "Sam?" They looked up at that moment. Not at me, but at the wall that separated us. "You're Samantha Kellen, aren't you?" A weak reply, barely audible. "Yes." I sighed with relief. We were all locked up, but I had found her and she was alive. Thank the gods for that. Do I know you?" "No," I said, sitting on the floor and checking over my various augmentations. "But I've been sent here to look for you. Your brother's very worried." Despite her predicament, she managed to scoff. "He took some time away from his desk to notice I was gone then." I decided to embellish a little. She was alone and I could hear the fear behind the comment. "You're lucky he's not here himself. He dropped all his cases. He's not going to rest until you're home safe." A pause as she turned over that information. I miss him." She started to sob. "He's the only family I have." I nodded. Not that she could see me. "I know the feeling. I have a sister too. And when I get you home, I'm hoping your brother will help me get her home." I could hear her sniffling. You think we're getting out of here alive?" I stood up and stretched. "Oh yeah, finding people and killing people, those are my specialties." "We're not leaving here," she said between sobs. "They need us. They need test subjects." Reva spoke up again. "What for? What are they doing down here?" As if the moment wasn't grim enough, from the darkness at the end of the hallway, a scream emanated. It was high-pitched, and the sound was more like that of an animal call than a human cry. "What the hell was that?" Jethro asked, getting to his feet. Mavic tilted his head and looked towards the sound. "Was that a waiter?" he said, sounding more scared than I would have expected. "The zombie creatures from the magical fallout? The hell is one of them doing down here?" Sam spoke up again. They were the first test subjects. They're what they've been using when they can't get clean, healthy victims. They're just too contaminated by the magical mutations. What they're doing, it won't work properly on them." I squinted, trying to make out the life form in my other sight, but it must have gone a long way down the tunnel, as I could only make out very vague impressions. A twisted humanoid form, hunched, muscular, moving in fast but jerky steps around its cell. "Sam, do you know what's going on here?" She pulled her legs up tighter to her body and huddled down. "They're trying to make some sort of zombie slave people, magically enhanced and controllable." That was new. I knew about zombies. Every now and then there was a breakout. I'd heard of golems, of flesh and stone and even wood. But zombies couldn't be controlled. And golems had a shelf life. The magic that controlled them and held them together had to be renewed, and often they would fall apart, then have to be put back together. There was only one flesh golem known to history that had walked free and not degraded, and Adam hadn't been seen for decades. It sounded like the witches wanted the best of both worlds. "What the fuck? What's the point?" Jethro asked, disgusted. She didn't reply. "You've seen this?" I asked. She nodded. "When I was first brought here, yeah, with some others, they did this whole ceremony." She trailed off and began to sob again. "I'm the last one left. After it didn't work the first time, they just kept taking us one by one, trying again and again. I could hear the screaming from here." I shivered. Whatever they were doing up there, it was obviously a lot of trial and error. "Is there anything else you can tell me? Anything that could help us?" Surprisingly, she got to her feet and walked to the bars, leaning forward on them, arms hanging through. The two in the opposite cell would have been able to see her. All I could see were her hands, pale and dirty. "They're crazy. They just keep chanting about their glorious purpose. Someone gave them some grotty old book. They call her the patron. They give thanks to her. That book, that's what they're using to cast the spell, for the mutations." I felt like my duty to save Sam had just been expanded upon. What went down in the garden wasn't really my problem, but if they were running out of people to test on here, they would keep headhunting elsewhere. It wouldn't stop. I looked to Mavic and Jethro. The elf was staring at me and Reva, eyes narrowed. I ignored the look. I fully intend to get us out of here and fuck some shit up on the way. You with us? Jethro smiled. If by some miracle you can actually deliver, I've got your back. I turned to the elf. Well? Well what? Can I count on you to actually chip in a fight? Fuck you, mongrel. What do you take me for, a coward? A yes would have been sufficient, Reva shot back. He shrugged. Fine. But why do I get the feeling you're not just looking at running away? We can't let them keep doing this, I said. They'll get more desperate soon and keep reaching further afield. So we're gonna try and pinch that book on the way out? He laughed. Good luck, hero boy. Just be ready as soon as the opportunity presents itself. He rolled his eyes and went back to sit in his dark and dingy cell. Time passed. If it wasn't for the clock in my heads-up display, there would have been no point of reference down here. Part of me was hoping enough time would pass that Reva and I could fire up our speed units again. But the longer we waited down here without food or water, the more risky that kind of augment would be. I was willing to risk it though. The air grew cold deep in the stone tunnel, and Reva and I sat back to back to try and preserve some heat as the temperature dropped. We could of course communicate without speaking, but there was something comforting about hearing words in the dark. Sorry to drag you into this, I said, and I meant it. She didn't need to be here. She really shouldn't have been. Seriously? If you hadn't done what you did back in the city, I would be dead anyway. At least you brought me a few more days of excitement. I smiled to myself. Still, I should have... I don't know. I trailed off, unsure how to continue. She shuffled around so that we sat side by side, huddled in close. If anything goes to shit, take Sam and get the fuck out of the garden. Then go get Fia out. Between you and her, you guys should be able to organize some kind of deal with Shaky. Trying to save everyone, huh? I side-eyed her and she smiled. Someone needs to. I don't see anyone else stepping up in this shit show of a life. She laid her head on my shoulder, her voice soft like she was dropping off to sleep. We're both getting out of here. I owe you. I put my arm around her and drew her in even closer, wishing we had the blanket or a jacket at least. That bed back in the fort, it's looking pretty damn good right about now, huh? A soft snore was my only reply. I passed the night without much sleep. I was desperately trying to formulate a plan, but there was too many variables. I had no clue if they would take us out all at once or just one by one. I had a rough idea of the ceremony that they would put us through thanks to Sam, who had seen it before. She whispered details to me through the wall as the others slept. She had no major cybernetics that were of any use to us, and the magic the witches were wielding was next level anyway. If all the witches were assembled for the ceremony, it was anyone's guess how we would get an opportunity to break free. Finally, morning came. I was woken not by the sun, but by the sound of the door above us being opened. The squeal of the hinges and the padding of bare feet down the stairs. It was loud in the quiet gloom. Many feet. I was proven right when 6 witches clad in black robes, tattooed bald heads and faces stern, walked past our cells. One looked into our cell, judging us like meat on a rack. Take them all. Today we will make history. They bound us again, all of us, not opening our cells until we were immobilized. Instead of levitating us this time, we were magically tethered and forced to walk in a line. I looked over my shoulder at Sam, who was forced from her cell. She looked the most untouched out of all of us, sickly and exhausted but unharmed. She even still had her long blonde hair pulled back in a tight tail. I turned to Reva, locking eyes with her as we were forced forward. Keep your eyes peeled, I thought to her. I couldn't hear her, but I could feel the forced calm she was trying to override her fear with. We were led in a shuffling step, walking from the knees down, up the steps back into the light of the morning. It seemed that even the witches feared the night here. Either that or they needed time to prepare. The open space that could have been called a courtyard that we had walked through the day before was now occupied by over a dozen women. I swapped over my vision and scanned them. They all had little to no augmentations. Only a couple of them had any major cybernetics. tech that was more aligned with the entertainment and sex industries. I guessed that they had led very different lives before they came here. I could see how and why these women were drawn to these communities, outcasts and alone, wanting to empower themselves, not wanting to be controlled or dominated. It made sense why they found a home in the covens. It just so happened that some of them had slowly slid from the side of reason and freedom to wanting to exact some kind of revenge on the world that had abandoned them. Hate and fear were a motivator I was more than familiar with. We were led into a circle carved into a large section of exposed black stone. Hieroglyphics and geometric shapes encircled us and passed through the entire space. Our bondage was dropped. Straight away, Jethro lashed out at the nearest witch, his punch stopping short as it connected with an invisible barrier. A ripple in the air like a mirage radiated from where his fist made contact. The woman didn't even flinch. She just smirked and turned her back. Her confidence in the barrier confirmed, if anything. "Step in here, bitch! I'll wipe that grin off your face!" She half turned to regard him. "Keep up that fire, darling, you'll need it." They drew back, taking their places in two concentric rings around the altar. It had been erected in the center of the yard. Our prison was off to the side, but we had a clear view as the young woman who had captured Reva and I ascended the stairs to stand atop it. You could feel the awe and respect from the rest of the coven as she moved through them to her new position of power. This woman had brutalized and killed, but she had every one of these witches under her thumb. United, focused, a true cult. "My sisters," she called out at the top of her lungs, "we gather again to pay tribute to the gifts of our patron and summon the power owed to us." There was no cheer, no reply. Her passion and verve was met with solemn silence. The only sound in the silence was the crashing of the waves far below the cliffs behind us. "We have toiled long and hard to conjure this prize. So close we are." A cold wind gusted up. Conjured or natural, I wasn't sure. It pulled and whipped at her robes, tatty and ragged strips flicking in the air and tumbling around her. She looked like the smoke she had become before. Her eyes ranged across the assembly, then fell on us. She continued, her tone taunting and arrogant. "Once we have delivered our promised price to our patron, we will have power and the freedom to conquer this paradise, to spread our new order to the whole West Coast." From in her robe, she drew a black leather-bound book and held it high over her head. "For the mother, for our sisters, for the garden!" The coven chanted their only reply, "For the garden!" Thank you for listening to Cyphers Edge. Subscribe so as not to miss future episodes. New episodes uploaded every second Saturday. Script and narration by JJ Brandis. Music was provided by Cale McLeish. Copyright JJ Brandis 2025.